fox and the green one, little fox and the blue one, fox and the yellow one, and the little and the fox.
Last week, we discussed the rise of the Karen as a pop culture phenomenon and a standard label for anyone who takes issue with not getting her way. In addition to Karens, we discussed other societal labels and stereotypes that impact the way we view, perceive, and interact with one another. Today, we will dive more deeply into the racial implications that come with the name Karen, the threat a Karen could pose on Black and Brown lives, with historical context, and what might cause the fear-driven reactions to Black people in predominantly white spaces. Hello, and welcome to the You Can Call Me Karen podcast, where we discuss current event and pop culture topics with the goal of finding common ground through shared experiences and balanced perspectives. I am Stephanie J., and I am joined by my dear friends, Karen Horwitz and Manny Rosa.
Hello.
Before we get started with today's topic, let's check in with Manny and Karen to find out, who are you calling Karen? Who are you calling Karen?
Who are you calling Karen? I'll kick us off. Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be back on the pod. This week, I was scrolling through the TikTok, and I think this happened.
For a second, I was like, the what?
The what?
The TikTok, of course, yes.
The TikTok, and which I'm so sad I can't send you guys videos anymore.
Very upsetting.
But because there's been so many that I wanted to, especially this particular one. And I'm not sure if you have seen it, because I believe when I went back to look at it on the interwebs, it happened June 24th. But this woman, Beth Bourne, is who I'm calling Karen this week.
You're calling out on blast.
Well, it was a whole thing. She is one of the presidents of the Moms of Liberty in the California chapter. And she was at a hotel in Hawaii, I guess the last week of June. And while she was staying there, they were also filming for some drag queen episode. And so the drag queens were in the lobby resting between filming. And Beth Bourne decided to come down and cause a ruckus because she did not like seeing the drag queens, because she, quote unquote, quote, paid $3,000 to stay at the hotel. She is a quote unquote real woman. This is completely offensive to her. What about her son, who might walk down at any moment and see these drag queens? So the TikTok was a whole video of the exchange. I believe this woman, she works at UC Davis in California, and I believe she might have been asked to leave her position. I'm not sure. I'll have to do a little bit more research on that, but I can link everything into our podcast notes. But I think just as we discussed on our last episode of like, why do these people trigger me, and what was like my visceral reaction while watching? And I just had a couple of wonderings that I don't think I'll ever really get answers to. Like, and I think this will go deeper into when we talk on today's episode, perhaps, of like, why do people jump to the phone? Like, why did you have to record it? Your reaction to this is one. And then
So wait, did she record her reaction?
She was recording her. She was recording the drags and like her, like, just.
Oh, this wasn't like an innocent bystander that was like, oh, I gotta record this moment.
No,
this
she
was her.
Pulled it out and was like, yeah, like, I'm recording. Like, she was going to put it on. Like, look at this. Look how wrong this is. This is so offensive to me. And when you hear her, she is truly threatened by these people, truly in her sense, in her reality, right?
Her feelings are valid.
She has fear, like, it's really coming from like her throat. Like, she's And so it's that part was like, wow. But the other layer of that is just thinking, as I'm a mom who has 3 kids and we like to take vacation, and she's talking about her kid. This is the entitlement for the Karens, right? She's talking about, what about my kid, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, what if I was somebody who's actually in the lobby with my 3 kids, and my kids are witnessing you totally verbally abusing these people. Now I have to have a conversation with my kids about this
So they have this
behavior.
ripple effect.
Yeah. And so it's like, I just, that's what's kind of disturbing to me, of like the reaction versus the response, I guess, is what I think about when I call somebody, or when I think of calling somebody a Karen. It's this like very big, dramatic response that is overly emotional, that has implications on other people because the emotions are so big. The subject matter is not big. The subject matter is very small, but the emotional reaction is so big. And it's like, if it is for the children, or if it is for the protection of other people, then how come you can't respond calmly? Because right now what you're presenting is actually making me feel psychologically unsafe.
Unsafe. Yeah.
And if I feel this way, then if my children are going to feel this way. So anyway, Beth Bourne, I don't know what's happened. I just, again, came across it, but that's my Karen for the week.
For another day, it just makes me want to unpack that response more, of like, why? Like, why is that so threatening? You know, why was she genuinely afraid?
Yeah.
I would love to. Anyways,
I think she
topic for
believes
another
that
day.
when I did a quick Google search, I think she believes that the presence of drag queens makes young men want to cut their penis off and become women. And for some reason, that's a problem.
No,
Is this
is that
real?
real?
Yeah, that's what she kept saying in the video. And then when I Googled, that's what came up. And I think she has a whole platform on Moms of Liberty devoted to some, I'm using this term lightly, research that shows that some a cohort of young men went to this, I want to say Kaiser or something, were shown a video, and now they want to be women. I don't know where she's getting her facts, but that's what makes her really, that's the hill she's going to die on.
That makes me think of how people want to tell us teachers what we can, excuse me, and can't teach in the classroom because they fear we will indoctrinate. And that there's those memes that are like, friends, if we wanted to indoctrinate your children, we'd encourage deodorant. And doing their homework
Them
is
to
really
write
what
their
I
name
want to
on the paper.
indoctrinate them to do.
Please just follow the instructions. That would be a great start.
Right.
All right, I will quickly share my story just to bring a little levity. So, my Karen of the week, it was a long weekend last weekend, and we were at a little hotel in Michigan, like on Lake Michigan with some friends. And there was literally 10 adults and 10 children. It was a madhouse. And so we were walking distance to this little beach, which was like a private beach for the neighborhood that we were staying in. And we walked down the one day, and we were making the whole day of it. It was the morning. We had all of our things. Everyone was strapped up with their tents and their chairs and whatever. We get down and we start setting up in this area. Somebody had set up this like half moon of chairs, folding chairs. Nobody was there, but they had set them up, clearly trying to reserve that space. And it was just in a little bit of an awkward space because there's this little creek that fed into the lake that the kids were having fun playing in that we couldn't set right next to. So then we sat on the opposite side of these chairs. We started setting up. We didn't move them. We didn't do anything. We were just next to those chairs. And then this guy at the house that was closest to where those chairs were calls over to us, and he's like, admittedly, he did say, I'm sorry to be that guy, But then he's like, this is a private beach and we have a big group coming here today, so you can't set up here. And we were like, okay, Karen. It was like, this whole beach, there's no people there in his seats. He's one man on his deck doing a flippin' hit workout with, I was just so irritated. I'm like, we have 10 children, man. Like, I am holding on by a thread right now. This is our spot. So anyways, we picked up and moved. It ended up being fine. We were there for like 4 hours or something like that, and then trekked back with all the kiddos. When we were trekking back, just to be clear, there was only 3 people in his crew, in his large crew, sitting at his, we could have been in and out and he would have never even noticed. I was so annoyed. So Chad, Brian, I don't know what they're called, but you know, that was my experience.
It's always the case.
Yes, exactly.
There we are.
Like, why don't we wait until like something actually really threatening happens, and then we'll solve it. But like,
or like, hey guys, just so you know, we have a huge crew coming in a couple of hours, so if you're going to set up there, we're going to be in your way. But and then we would have been like, we'll be out of here in a few hours because we have littles, and everyone would have been happy. How long
do you guys think that you're going to be hanging around?
Yeah. Any other approach would have been lovely.
Right.
Well, I feel like that is perfect. I feel like it calls back to something Monica said during our last episode, where if we were maybe posing something as a question, like a simple, how long are you going to be here? And something else that was just said was, why don't we wait until there's an actual threat? And so I think that's a perfect segue into our topic for today. Okay, so what we're really going to do today is to dig a little bit deeper into the name Karen. You know, obviously there's a lot of funny thoughts when you hear the word Karen, and you know, Karen's beach example is the perfect example of the casual use of the word Karen. However, I first want to just start out with, how would the two of you define Karen? What maybe would be a common, like maybe if we can come to like a consensus on what is a Karen to start. So does anyone have like a definition of a Karen you might want to like operate with? Maybe another question we could also answer at the same time is, what thoughts come to mind when you hear the name Karen, or what feelings come up when you hear the name? Because I know I have a response to that, but I want to hear
friends on this podcast.
Yes, minus my dear friend who I've known a million years.
Go ahead. You want to go first, Karen? Okay.
Yeah, as the namesake, I was gonna say, like entitlement, someone who feels entitled or in a position of power, whether deserved or otherwise. That like entitlement is the thing that like really stands out to me when I hear that name. That's my very brief definition. Miss Manny.
I think of a Karen, when I think of the word Karen, I think of somebody who cannot mind their own fucking business.
It's that part right there.
I'm thinking
and we're done. Thank you for tuning in.
I'm thinking about the woman. I'm so happy that you guys were here for this. And I actually was not here for this actual encounter, but I'm thinking about that woman on vacation in Mexico who came up to my husband and was like, why are you on your phone?
Ooh. Oh my!
I forgot about that.
Who cannot mind their own business, right?
Oh, by the way, she had the haircut.
She did have the haircut.
She was really owning it.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's interesting because when, you know, I can't mind my own fucking business is like perfection is perfection. And when I think about Karen, though, I also think about particularly white women who utilize their privilege and power to maybe jeopardize or attack Black people. And as a Black woman, when I hear the term Karen, my immediate thought, the first thing that comes to mind more recently, is the woman, I don't know if you remember the story of Amy Cooper. This happened in
Central Park
2020.
Karen.
Yeah,
Central Park Karen. And why she comes to mind is because when she made the phone call on the man, Christian Cooper, the exaggerated breaths, the call to the police to come and save her. And she kind of explicitly said before she made the call, I'm going to call the police, kind of knowing full well what the consequence could be. And so when I hear, it's interesting because Karen is a part of the name of our podcast, and there's so many layers to the name Karen, and I feel like it kind of speaks to the type of topics that I know that we're going to dig into over the course of our series. But particularly today, I think about there was an article that I read written by Michael Harriot. It was posted in the
Love
Washington
him.
Post.
I know.
Shout
I
out
was
to
gonna
him. If
chime
you
in too.
ever watch or subscribe to our podcast, Michael Harriot, I will die.
Michael Harriot is king.
Speaking it into existence. Please
Yes.
don't kill my friend.
The title of the article, it was written back in 2020 when the event happened. It really spoke to me. It says, Amy Cooper is the kind of white woman Black families warn their children about.
Mm-mm.
That's what comes to my mind when I hear the term Karen, because I think about what Black families tend to have to do to prepare for such a situation. So before we even get into that, are we all on the same page when we say we know what the talk is?
I think we are, but I think it would be beneficial for the listener to hear a quick
What
Yes.
you mean by that?
Intro.
Because are we talking about the birds and the bees, or are we talking?
White people
Right.
will probably think of it as the sex talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have the talk.
The talk is a conversation that Black families tend to have with our children in preparation for the fact that our existence can be of threat to those in the white community. And someone like Amy Cooper could then fear you. And in a lot of cases, that could lead to police involvement, which could lead to, death. Michael Harriot said this really eloquently. I'm going to just quote him. He said, all of these lessons are centered on how to make white people feel comfortable, why their existence often makes white people feel uncomfortable, and why they must learn these lessons or die. And so with that, I have the question of what is the threat, that Amy Cooper and I think of Permit Patty and Barbecue Becky, who picks up the phone, like Monica references, because of what is the threat that is faced? Because I know the threat of the call made.
Yeah. I want to pause for just 1 second and add that the talk isn't just about how Blacks have to position themselves in white spaces. It's also how we are to respond when those cops arrive on the scene. That's also an extension of the conversation, is to be submissive. And that's like when we talk about privilege. I've had several friends since the Black Lives Matter movement was popularized after George Floyd come up to me and talk to me about experiences that they had and encounters with the police, and how they talked to the police in those moments, and how it was just they in the moment didn't think about it, right? They're operating off of emotion. They didn't realize that that was actually a privilege, that they got to respond to cops in that way, where in our situation as Black Americans, there's a certain way that we've been taught from our parents because of generational trauma to respond to law enforcement because of the history of submission and Black Americans in society.
Yeah, I can't.
I think of a few interactions I've had with the police. I should probably save this to confessionals, but like specifically one time I got pulled over doing sorry mom and dad, like 95 in a 60 mile an hour zone or something just obnoxious, and I was like 16 or probably 16. Pulled me over and came to the window, and my wallet was in the back seat, and
Steph's
he
reaction
asked,
already is,
yeah, he asked for my ID or whatever. And so I ripped off my seatbelt, like dove half of my body into the back seat, grabbed my purse, grabbed my wallet, pulled it out. And at no moment in that did he have his gun or his hand on his gun or yell at me or anything to behave differently or whatever. It was just a dumb little 16-year-old girl who was clearly grabbing her wallet, because that's what most people would be doing in that scenario, regardless of the color of their skin. But like the thought literally never occurred to me that I was in any danger whatsoever. Never occurred to me. And now as an adult, I'm understanding like that many other people have different experiences or approaches to that situation. Like I didn't even tell him what I was doing.
fear.
I didn't even say like
in
my
that
wallet's in the
moment.
back, I have to grab it. I'm like, okay. It's just, yeah, no fear whatsoever. I was never taught to be afraid in any way, shape, or form of the police.
Yeah.
Not even.
And I think that's like the point, the talk, when I think Steph, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like the point that we even have to have the talk, right? Whether to the perceived white person or not, there is threat for us because of the generational and the historical context of it. And I remember last episode when we were talking about, or was it when I was talking? No, here when I was talking about Beth Bourne, of like, but what is the actual threat? Like, I would be able to empathize with people if I knew, like, is there a history of this occurring in your community, in your heritage? Is there a history of this where people have been lynched, where genocide has occurred? I just have a hard time empathizing because the threat feels like it is a little bit more of like something that you're like trying to make a thing, as opposed to the actual reality and lived experience of people in my community, my ancestors, and that. And so like maybe giving the benefit of the doubt in my community, right, in my white affluent community where I'm a member, maybe that doesn't exist, but the fear does exist. And I have had to have that talk because the fear was given to my family, which was given to my mom, which was given to her by her 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 mom, because of actual events of hatred, you know?
Yeah, speaking of the article that I'm referencing, Michael Harriot kind of chronicles a few of many events, but particularly the one that comes to my mind would be Emmett Till, 14-year-old in 1955, when a white woman claimed that he whistled at her and he was lynched, which was one of the major catalysts of the civil rights movement. The Tulsa 1921 massacre was at the root of that, was a white woman claiming that she was raped. Scottsboro boys, I mean, the list goes on, and these are for years and years, you know, early 19th century and even earlier. And so, you know, to Monika's point, these directions that we have to pass on to our children to stay safe really are rooted in historical context, where, to Manny's point again, what is at the root of the fear of us or of the Black community. And I think about, I wish I had like some primary sources, because I remember in one of my African American study classes, they, shared articles that in the like 1920s, it was post Emancipation Proclamation, obviously, but maybe during Reconstruction, early Jim Crow, and articles that claim, Black men are rapacious and dangerous, and, the creation of the slave patrol. Like, I'm thinking of the documentary 13th, and how it explains even how the police force came to be is just to protect the white community from Black people. And that fear has been passed down too,
Yeah.
so
And not even by, oh, sorry, finish.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, reading a book, The Warmth of Other Suns. This is my summer read. It's like a 500-page book.
Yes.
So like, it's going to take me a while to get through.
I'm
I'm halfway
literally
through.
reading that.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so detailed. But Steph, as you're talking about this, and when we're talking about the threat, like the threat for why these codes and these laws were created was because they didn't want Black people to vote, because they didn't want Black people to make more money and wages, right? So we're not talking about any violent criminal behavior. We're talking about policing every aspect of a Black person's life. And so when we're talking about, unbuckling your seatbelt to go into the back of the car to grab your wallet, like it's policing every aspect of our life, right? To make us compliant, to make us submissive. And so that's where like the sadness comes from, I think, and where like the fear and the rage, like all of it is because it wasn't because of anything violent. And even if it was, that doesn't make it correct, but it's because of the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation, giving Black people these freedoms, and white Southerners trying to recorrect that at every opportunity so that Black people could be second-class citizens or go back into enslavement, And so I think Karen said the word on our last episode of like consciousness. It's just, these things are just ways that we're asking people to like build this into your consciousness, as opposed to like being like, well, that was so long ago. It's like, well, this still exists. Like this still exists. If
It's like woven into all of our
my
systems.
DNA.
And
yes, all of our systems. Exactly.
so if I could, I think the natural tendency, I might be overstating, but a dominant tendency, particularly for white people when hearing these things and speaking as a white person, is defensiveness of like, I'm not racist. I didn't do these things. They were terrible things. They were done a long time ago. They're not here anymore. It's not my fault. Because, yeah, maybe because there's guilt there, or maybe because you have experienced hardships in your life too, and you think like, I've had my own hard times. So why is it different, or why is it less important, or whatever? It's like defensive. It's a defensive response. And I guess I say that because I'm not trying to dismiss other people's lived experiences, but I do think one of the things that can be divisive about this conversation is the feeling that it's like them and us. And the reality is these things existed, these things happened, and all of those systems that were put in place probably in fear of Black people getting their revenge, because frankly, we white people did terrible things and probably recognize that, and we're probably afraid. In the South, white people were outnumbered, I think. And so, I think they all stemmed from real fear in that time. And I guess I'm not saying that white people today, you are at fault, but I think if we just recognize that this is a real experience for other people. I'm not blaming you, individual, for why we are where we are today, but I am asking you to hear about it and understand a different perspective and recognize the little things that we do day to day that either allow it to continue or, overlook other people's experiences. Like, be open-minded and hear more about this before letting your defenses come up and then not being able to see another person for who they are and for what they've been through. I don't know.
Yeah. And
it's perfectly said.
I think going back to like, how does this thread into like the Karens and like the trigger that I have when I see a Karen again, is that like, I talked about the phone, right? Of like, why do you go to your phone? And Steph, you talked about Emmett Till and like that picture, that image. And Michael Harriot talks about this in his article. It's if you know anything about Black history, this is a very pivotal moment in the civil rights movement. If you go visit the African American History Museum, you'll see there's like a very, very somber memorial for Emmett Till. It's one of the most beautiful memorials that I have ever witnessed. But that moment was used to generate change for peace, harmony, integration, community, connectiveness. And it's almost being weaponized when we see people go to their phone, like the story that I shared in the beginning, to say, wait, look at me, to Karen's point of like, I feel threatened. And it's like, it's using that to kind of like try and make a stance against something to shift to change. That upsets me a little bit, because that moment of having your son's casket be open so that the public could see it, to experience that, to see the harm, the dehumanization of that body, that was so intentional and took so much courage. And now it's like people just kind of default to like, I'm just going to go on the phone so I can be the one who shows you what justice is like. And we'll put this on the internet, and then people will decide, and they'll cancel you and they'll hate you and you'll get fired from your job or whatnot. And it's like, we've totally missed the point of what media and images are supposed to invoke in us as humans. And that's what's upsetting.
This is why I think social media is the end of humanity, because it is like everybody feels like they are an influencer, or that they have some kind of a platform. And like, we are living on a planet with, I don't know, 7 billion, I don't know what the number is anymore, people. Like, we are one of 7 billion. Like, we're not all, sorry, but we're not all important on a grand scale, but we're all part of, a community. We're all part of the human race, to be so like ridiculously, what's the word? Doesn't matter. And so I just think like, I just think people have this false sense of like, I'm going to get famous. And social media is going to give me that platform to do it. And it's like, gosh, just stop. Just stop.
And like, it's like false. Brene Brown, not Brene Brown. I think it was Esther Perel was a guest on a Brene Brown podcast, and she coined it like artificial intimacy. AI is artificial intimacy. And it goes back to our previous conversation of like, wouldn't it be just nice if you like put the phone down and just asked like what they were doing, sitting in the lobby, what they were filming? Wouldn't you be able to get that connection that you're seeking? Wouldn't you be able to get that understanding that you are searching for, if you just kind of didn't default to trying to criminalize people, right? And so I don't know. And I was also thinking about this, like the time period, it was 2020 when Central Park Amy, right, came, and we were all stuck in our homes, right? So people were paying attention. But I remember still reeling over Ahmaud Arbery. Like that took me back to like A Time to Kill, where like these people took justice into their own hands, and like we're like, yo can't be a mission, you can't be like, and like, is that like frightened me even more because I was like, wow, they just really dragged this man's body through. And like, because it wasn't we weren't trapped in home watching on our phones, it didn't get the kind of publicity that Amy Cooper got, when that is like, and this is the point of the connection to the warmth of other suns. Like in the North, people were surprised because Central Park is supposed to be like a progressive area with like liberal. Don't, and like the warmth of other suns goes through how this thought, right, is prevalent in every region, right? So it can
Well,
look
I remember
as subtle
when
as calling the police, or as violent as dragging somebody's body out of a house while they're just going for a run.
Well, I remember when the Amy Cooper event happened and people were upset that the reason it seemed that people were so upset with her, because, you know, there was consensus, Black and white people agreed that she was out of line, because Christian Cooper was, you know, Harvard studied, he was a bird watcher, he had, you know, and he was an acceptable, palatable Black man. There was like that. And oftentimes when Black men are victims of a police shooting or like a George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin kind of moment, there's this opportunity for the character of the victim to be dragged. And in this case, he was, you know, kind of universally like, he's
palatable,
a good guy.
like you said, palatable. I think that's a
Palatable.
great, like I remember with the George Floyd murder that people were like, well, he was using counterfeit
He did
money.
steal, the money, right?
And I'm like, so he
So
has to
die.
die? Like, I don't understand that statement.
Yeah.
Like, we should, like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. That, like, I know we have to wrap up, and I'll just end on this point, but that just one thing that, like, I just remember learning, I want to say in college, was that there are actually 4 branches of government, and the media is our 4th branch of government, determining how we are voting and our influence for our politics. And so, to Karen's point, just be mindful of how you consume your social media, how you consume your news, because it's a little bit more targeted. Influence.
And it's hard to know, even like, what I was going to say, like, do your own research, but then like,
How do you know what is responsible journalism? Yeah, what is responsible journalism? Exactly. Yeah.
There's a whole separate podcast on this topic, man.
I like when you said for the government is media, that's a topic we got for sure. I love it.
We gotta add that one to the list.
Got to add that to the list.
Yeah. Well, that went by fast, guys.
That went fast. Did anyone have a quick confessional before we wrap up for today?
I feel like I have a gajillion, because like I've had moments in my life where I'm reflecting on the ways that I've reacted to Black people in my, space, whether that was in school, whether that was on the street, whether that was whatever. And I guess, my confessional is that I still have moments where I find my immediate reaction to a person in an unexpected surrounding, and I have to like check that and ask myself, why am I having that thought or that concern, or even just like that observation at all? And this whole conversation was giving me moments of like realizing when I do that. And I think the important thing there for me is just consciousness of it. I can't unlearn things I've learned for years and years of my life overnight, but I can be aware of them and make sure I'm asking myself and checking in with myself when a reaction or a judgment feels like unnecessary or brash. So anyways, that's just my reflection.
I love that. I feel like that's kind of speaks to our thoughts on labels and stereotypes, and can we change? And the answer is yes, if we are conscious about it and if we are intentional. And so I love to hear that it's like a continuous thought and process. And I think about myself too, with my professional being. I just am constantly seeking, making sure that, people are comfortable with me and code switching and all that kind of thing. And it's interesting, like, how we all maneuver this space. And so, anyway, well, thank you
Thank you guys.
for joining us. The article and a really great TED Talk is linked in our notes. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you noon.
And the fox, and the green one, and the fox, and the blue one, and the fox, and the yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.